So last part of our presentation. In the last 5 minutes of JFK's speech, he used ethos, logos, and pathos to in harmony to help convince the audience by outlining the ethical nature of his proposals, the framework of his logical path towards progressive, and the emotional appeal of taking action towards nuclear disarmament. When JFK says, our hopes must be tempered with the caution of history, but with our hopes go the hopes of all mankind. He is invoking logos, pathos, and ethos in one swift stroke, capturing the audience attention, recognizing different audience members' different priorities, and preparing every listener to allow themselves to be carried by his persuasive conclusion. By proposing that hopes needed to be tempered with caution, JFK was acknowledging that historically, suggestions of disarmament and peace have been met with continual violence. This appears to be the logic of Americans who might have been doubtful about whether JFK was approaching this goal in a reasonable, measured manner. By addressing skeptical viewers' potential concern proactively, he used logic to allow listeners to set aside their doubtful about him. As a speaker, even if they still have reservation about his plan. Meanwhile, in his very next utterance, by suggesting that all of humanity was united in hope for peace and disarmament, JFK provides back towards appealing to the audience emotions and sense of ethics by suggesting that peace not only feels right, but it is a global ethic. The speaker is appealing to the emotion of listeners who have been hoping for peace and the ethic of those who believe peace is ethical. This swift pivot for logos to pathos and ethos is a technically like to capture the attention of listeners with a wide variety of priorities and perspectives. After earning the attention of his entire audience regarding of whether they responded to the logo, path, and ethos of his argument, JFK then made an assertion that everyone across the world was hoping for peace, invoking the power of social proof and applying clear influence of his listeners, who may not even have realized they were being convinced. While perhaps serving the strength of ethos of his persuasive speech, the assertion that everyone was hoping for peace is recognizable of the powerful social proof. JFK's decision to say, with our hopes go the hopes of all mankind, not only highlights but helps to establish a social paradigm of hoping for peace by putting pressure on those who do not hope for peace to act within social norms or expectations. The application of social proof may be a common weapon of influence, but this method of influence is particularly effective here because in the same alteration JFK was earned the attention of logo, pathos, and ethos motivated listeners. Furthermore, by giving listeners the benefit of doubt and characterizing the entire world population as a peace-loving, JFK is likely persuading some listeners without them to even realize it. Later in his conclusion, JFK appears to logos again and at greater length, suggesting that the president understood that although the ethical and emotional appearance of peace requires less attention, the logical objection to peace among his audience member might be the most stubborn. In earlier section of his speech and during the beginning of his conclusion remarks, JFK does take the time to appeal to listeners' sense of ethos and pathos in order to ensure that he is acknowledging the variety of priorities among his listeners. However, In his concluding remarks, JFK spent the most time and attention reinforcing the logos of his argument and his position as an authority on peace. These remarks sense because JFK's role as a speaker must also reflect his role as the president and leader of his people. When JFK acknowledged that no theory, however much it may be the advantage of all, however tightly it may be worded, can provide absolute security against the risk of deception and evasion. He both acknowledged and argued with the rational concern of many Americans who may have been hesitant to put their faith in peace or disarmament treaties. By proactively addressing the logical concern of his audience, he takes time to appear for the attention and consideration of the audience member who might be the most skeptical of his plan. Furthermore, as he speaks with the logic and certainty regarding the subject of peace and disarmament treaties, JFK is helping to establish himself as an authority regarding logical concern about paths towards peace. This means that by spending extra time to attend to the logical consideration of paths towards peace, he is also helping to bolster an additional persuasive tool in his repertoire by establishing his own wisdom, skepticism, and sharp scrutiny and of any path towards peace. JFK is establishing himself as an authority figure who is worthy not only of his leadership role but of his listeners' trust. Simultaneously, JFK leverages this tool of influence in his next utterance, where he advocates for treaties instead of an unabated, uncontrolled, and appreciable arm race by addressing listeners' concerns immediately before making a broad authorities statement like this. JFK may have positioned himself to whether concern about his youth or lack of experience. In so doing, JFK seemed to have both helped it to establish his authority and use it to persuade listeners to trust him on this issue. This is the last part of the presentation, and thank you all for watching.